Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of means of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. Today is day 3 of this 5-day sesshin here at Hidden Valley Zen Center in January 2016. And I'd like to share with you a message that came in yesterday from a student of mine elsewhere. And it has a great deal of importance to all of us. As we're doing our practice, we are exploring our own mind. Hopefully that's clear. And in order to do that, we settle our body. We work on becoming inwardly quiet so that our own mind can be revealed. And along with that are revealed all the places we're caught. And that's initially daunting, because who wants to see where they've been perhaps less than skillful in their activity? Who wants to feel a tightness in their chest of loss or a disappearance or something that we can't have or something we did and are ashamed of? There's so many things that can do this to us. And yet it's important to open to all of it. Someone recently sent me a link to a paper that was presented by a woman who is teaching religion at University of Washington, I think it was, UW. And she also happens to be lay ordained in the Buddhist tradition. In other words, she's got been given a Buddhist name and received a raksu. That's generally what's consisting of lay ordained in the Soto sect, which is the sect of Buddhism that she was ordained in. And she's also a mindfulness teacher. Mindfulness, of course, is a huge buzzword these days in America, thanks in part to the research by John Kabat-Zinn, who initially was seeking to find some way of showing the benefits of really Zen practice. He had gone to a workshop at the Rochester Zen Center, and my understanding is that he then continued to practice meditation and wanted to find some way to give the benefits to more people. Zen, when he started practicing, when I started practicing, with some of the rest of you who started practicing, was very suspect. It was equated with cults, and there's more than one story of parents who had their children who were doing Zen practice reprogrammed, and there was an era when reprogramming was a big thing. And in fact, I have a friend who, for a period of time, was the abbot of the San Francisco Zen Center. And she'd been in a car accident when she was 19 years old, I think, and had been hit by a car, and it sent her flying through the air with a direct aim at a telephone pole. And as she was flying through the air, seeing that telephone pole coming right up to her, she thought she was going to die. And she did indeed hit the telephone pole. And when she came back to consciousness, she was shocked that she was still alive. And it took her some time to adjust to the new reality that she had awakened to in the process of assuming that she was going to die. One would guess that she did a heck of a lot of letting go in the process. Because when you are flying through the air with a dead head connect with a telephone pole and an assumption that you're going to not survive it, there's a lot you're going to let go of. And so she did, and then she found Zen practice at San Francisco Zen Center. And her mother, back in New York City, began to get alarmed. What was her daughter doing with this Zen thing? And she actually arranged with a psychiatrist to deprogram her. And this woman actually happened to have a twin sister who was still living in New York City, who clued her into what was going on. And she decided to face the music, cut to the chase, and flew back to New York and went to visit the psychiatrist at the request of her mother. The psychiatrist found that she was totally normal, that there was no problem, and told her mother that the real problem was the mother, not the daughter. But there were some other cases where adult children got into Zen practice, and the outcome was not as pleasant. So when we do Zen practice, we do open to stuff. And this was the point of this paper, because the traditional teachings of Zen as we inherited it from Japan are to just focus single-mindedly on the koan, on the practice. Ignore everything else, just single-mindedly focus on the practice, which is half the story. But it appeared, and the way it was taught, that it was the entire story. If anything comes up, shove it out of sight. We know now that to focus directly on the koan does not mean to shove everything else away. As our mind settles down, on the way we begin to have stuff come up. We may feel like we're blocked in some way, and that usually means that there's something in our past that has been challenging enough that we've repressed it and don't want to feel it. And as you've heard more than once here, Zazen, Zen meditation, done over enough time takes the lid off. So that if there is anything buried in there, it's going to show up. And then there is this tremendous opportunity to really work on it, to allow it to process through. And when that happens, when we're able to work in that way, our practice takes a great leap forward, because suddenly that block is not there anymore. If we don't, if we try to shove it under the carpet, again, stuff it back in its box, we begin to realize how constrained our life is, how narrow and how painful our life is. And often people will quit practice at that point, which is sad, because they've reached a doorstep where they have a choice, and they could open to that stuff, and sometimes it's big enough, challenging enough that it's very helpful to work with a skilled therapist, particularly someone who has a background in Zen practice or the Theravada practice, and to help process that through. But there's a lot that can be processed through simple awareness, paying close attention to the experience in our body of what is coming up. It can make all the difference in the world. For example, if we find ourselves easily triggered into anger, and instead we tune in as soon as this feeling of anger comes up or starts to come up, tune into our body and check out the energy that's flying around in our body at that point, suddenly there is space in our life. And we don't feel compelled to act out of that anger. Instead, we are able to discern a healthier way of responding. And now, sometimes the healthier way of responding is to express the anger, but in a way that it's not controlling us, it's not driving us. So this is a person who has worked really, really hard on herself, and she's had a heck of a lot of things in her past that have been especially challenging. And she has been caught by a particular assumption about her life and about herself that has been a challenge to her to work with. And recently there's been an opportunity for it to come up big time, and she has really taken the bit in her mouth and become totally present with it, and explored the energies in her body and continue to do her deep practice, because her practice is deep after all these years. She's been practicing for many years. And here's what she wrote. The trick initially was not to substitute negative habit patterns and just feel the attachment. She's come up against attachment. She has begun to feel the energy in her body that the attachment expresses. And like is common when we begin to let go, there's an urge to substitute a different identity, a new identity, a substitute identity for the one that's being let go. And it's important if we reach this point in our practice, when we reach this point in our practice, because we will reach it if we continue to practice deeply. The important thing is not to do that. To be aware that you're trying to substitute something for what you've let go, because this not being somebody is feeling a little unsettling. And who are we if we have let go that assumption about ourselves, that attachment? She continues. The freedom feels like different territory. Letting go of all conditioning, which is what it feels like, is super hard. It's like realizing you're wearing a winter coat in the summer. You just let it slip off because you don't need it, but then you wonder a bit if you should have put it back on because you've always worn it. It's a beautiful way of expressing that exact situation. Let me read the whole thing again. The trick initially was not to substitute negative habit patterns, or any habit patterns, we would say, and just feel the attachment. Then it can let go. The freedom that is felt when we truly feel the attachment to the point where it lets go feels like different territory. Letting go of all conditioning, which is what it feels like, is super hard. It's like realizing you're wearing a winter coat in the summer. You just let it slip off when you realize that, because you don't need it. But then you wonder a bit if you should put it back on because you've always worn it. And who are you without that attachment? Who are we anyway? This is our number one question. Who are we? This is the basis of all the koans, whether it's the mu koan, the sound of one hand, our face before our parents were born, who am I? It's all the same. Really, it just has different cloaks. Who are we really? There's some folks that have read or written some things, had some comments about these kinds of things. And I'd like to share a few of them with you here. Somebody named Benjamin Smythe said, I can only project what I think is happening. When I stop projecting, all that's left is, wow. Wow. When we are so totally present, life is unbelievably incredible. Carl Jung said, your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. Trungpa, that rascal, did have some wisdom, even though he was caught in a web of alcohol. And this is one of the things he said that makes truth. In Tibetan, authentic presence is Wantan, which literally means field of power. Authentic presence, that means paying attention. Totally. That means being here now, 100%. The cause or the virtue that brings about authentic presence is emptying out and letting go. You have to be without clinging. And when this student that we just shared words of went right into the physical experience of her clinging, it let go. And suddenly she was without clinging. And realizing that that place was a little bit anxious making, and that she felt compelled to substitute something else in place of the clinging, something else to cling to. But she resisted. She's been doing tremendous work like this and has faced many, many difficult situations that have come up in terms of her history. But she's not rare. Everyone can do this. We need commitment. We need practice. We need the intention to really become free. And when we hold that intention, and I don't mean keep thinking of it and thinking of it and thinking of it. I mean, we make this intention, and every time we recite the Bodhisattva vows, we're doing that in essence, then our practice begins to unfold in ways that make that intention realized. David Bohm. Thought runs you. Thought, however, gives false info that you are running it, that you're the one who controls it, whereas actually thought is the one which controls each one of us. And when we drop out of our attachment to thought, and here we want to say something else about the traditional way of describing practice that came to us from Japan. And another one of the instructions was to cut thoughts. Cut off all thoughts. And what that really meant is to cut our attachment to thoughts. It doesn't mean to get rid of thoughts. When we are not invested in thoughts, they'll kind of diminish by themselves. Once in a while they may come up a little stronger, but basically they diminish. And there are times when we go deep enough where we can actually choose not to bring up a thought, which is very different from cutting it. If we try to cut our thoughts every time they start to arise, pretty soon we'll get to a point where it'll be so habitual that when we need to think, we won't be able to. And I know this because I ended up there and had to spend a fair amount of time learning to let myself think again. It's about, when we are doing our practice, to focus on the practice. Focus in particular on the extended out-breath, which is the benefit of requiring focus. And when we really work on that and being curious about what we can realize through that, then thoughts begin to diminish. There's not really a problem with thoughts. When we first sit down on the cushion, we may have some sticky thoughts, particularly if something intense has happened to us, or we're embroiled in some problem that we want to solve. I remember once sesshin many years ago in Rochester, where somebody came, and it was a doctor, came all the way from Israel for sesshin. And he came from Israel because he'd had a heart attack, and he was scared silly of dying, and wanted to do Zen practice to escape that. But escape was so much on his mind that he instead came up with a problem of medical problem that he was concerned about, and spent his entire 7 days puzzling over that medical problem as opposed to just doing his practice. And he was quite happy at the end of sesshin because he'd solved his medical problem. And Mitra-roshi was deeply disappointed because he'd missed this entire opportunity to go somewhere so much deeper, particularly for someone who was afraid of dying. But it was the very fear of dying that inspired him to avoid it and to use that question about whatever his medical problem was that he wanted to solve as an escape. We have to be careful about these escapes in our practice. It's not going to do us any good. It's challenging to not escape when the practice feels dead, or when we feel we're blocked, or when something painful is coming up or difficult is coming up. But as I said earlier, if there is something painful or difficult buried within us, it will come up in the process of Zazen, because Zazen is about becoming ever more clear, ever more aware. And we can't open up part of our mind and keep the rest of our mind shut down. It's impossible. But allow yourself to tune into the physical experience of whatever is coming up. If it's sticky, even if you don't know what it is, it doesn't matter. You feel blocked. Well, can't get the breath past here. Do the breath to where you feel stopped. Tune in. What does it feel like? And I am not asking for an answer up here. I'm asking for a description. What does blocked feel like? Feel like wooden? Feel like steel bands? Feel like you've shut down? Feel like icy? Feel like hot? What does it feel like in your body? That is the doorway to opening to the experience in a way that it can be processed through. As we do our practice, we're not about coming to awakening just to come to awakening. We're about coming to awakening so we can express our innate compassion and wisdom in everything we do. It's about allowing full awareness in each moment. And there is a Tibetan form of practice called Mahamudra, which is very much like Zen. And it is very important to bring mindfulness into both Zen practice and Mahamudra practice. And I'd like to share with you from this book called Mahamudra, The Quintessence of Mind in Meditation by Takpo Tashi Namgyal, translated and annotated by Lobsang Lalumpa. And there's a foreword by Chogyam Trungpa. And it's quite a big, thick book, as you can see. There's some things that are relevant to our Zen practice in here. Among other, the reasons why meditation on the true nature of mind is essential. Meditation on the true nature of mind in Zen practice is being intimately curious. Who am I, really? And being willing to go beyond any assumptions, any ideas, any conditioning, any images, because it is beyond all of those, and yet we can realize it. Part of this, reasons why meditation on the true nature of mind is essential, a subset is all realities are but mental phenomena. And they quote a couple of things. The Lankavatara Sutra states, all things appear as perfect reality to the mind. Apart from mind, no reality as such exists. To perceive external reality is to see wrongly. But we assume that what we're seeing is correct. We don't realize that what we're seeing is external. We also get a lot of ideas about who we are, what our mind is, and we assume that that's coming from inside. Only don't know is what the Korean Son Master Seung-san Sunim taught. Only don't know. Shunryu Suzuki said, beginner's mind. These are deep instructions, really. Sounds simple. But we're so full of what we think we know. We're so full of analyzing, assuming, picturing, and creating that we miss what is there fundamentally. And it is what is there fundamentally that is going to liberate us. No images, no ideas, no pictures, no assumptions, no conditioning is going to do it for us. We have to let all that go, let it recede into the background, let it be like those motorcycles that just went by a little while ago. We don't really have any investment in them. Or the traffic that we can occasionally hear on Deer Springs. Or the birds, the dogs, the coyotes. They're all peripheral. Let the images and the assumptions be peripheral too. Focus deeply on that experience of the out-breath and the searching through that avenue. Find out who you really are. To find your true home. Now there's another quote here. The Samputa says, all realities are of the mind's delusion. Apart from mind, nothing exists. All appearances are due to the mind's delusion. And then back here, under heading on mindfulness, specifically, in particular, how the role of mindfulness is vital in meditation, because mindfulness as seen in Zen, which is more than paying attention, it is being so truly present with everything that that we disappear, that there is only whatever the presence is. And that's very different from how mindfulness is taught in at least Albuquerque, New Mexico. Our practice really is about becoming more and more aware, more and more mindful. Because when we are aware enough, then it's easy to awaken. Because it's right before our eyes. In fact, it's closer than our eyes. It's so, well, of course it's like this. How could I have missed it? So mindfulness, awareness, is vital to our practice. And here's what is said. Mindfulness is generally considered indispensable, not only in the threefold religious training through hearing Dharma discourses, examining and meditating, but particularly in maintaining meditation absorption. The meditator should therefore maintain one-pointed mindfulness. If he loses his mindfulness, he's bound to miss the focal point of realization through it. And so then he quotes a couple of teachers. J. Padmo Trupa warns, unless one is on guard with mindfulness, the four evil robbers are bound to encircle one. There is the danger of one's losing the gem of awareness. So what are these four evil robbers? There's a note here. The four evil robbers are: 1, inner delusion. 2, the 5 aggregates of psychophysical existence which imprison a human being in the turning wheel of birth and death. 3, the unfailing force of death. And 4, the external and internal forces that seek to seduce a person into harmful action. And Jadrikumpa concludes, the uninterrupted stream of mindfulness is indeed the central path of the Buddhas in the 3 periods of time. If one does not know how to achieve an unperturbed mindfulness, one will fall prey to restive tendencies of body and mind. It takes practice to reach that point. When we first sit down, cross our legs, or whatever position we get into to start meditation, and we have the instruction to allow our awareness to be seated in our hara, as if we are aware from our belly, from tanden, tantian, which is a very grounded way of experiencing life. And we settle down, relax our body, but keep it upright, not tense, not floppy. And we begin to focus our mind on the experience of the out-breath. And initially, if it's difficult, we start counting on the out-breath. Count 1 all the way out, and we breathe out normally. And then when we reach the point where we would automatically breathe back in again, instead, we breathe out a little farther. And that requires a focusing of awareness on the experience of breathing out. And that focusing of awareness on the experience of breathing out requires a letting go of other involvements temporarily. And that is its gift. And we do it again and again and again. And our mind will wander all over the place. And we'll suddenly think about what we're going to do 10 years from now, or what we did last year, or who we saw, or this awful relationship we had with somebody, or this wonderful relationship we had with somebody, or there's any number of ways we entertain ourselves and distract ourselves from paying attention. And yet, each time we give ourselves to the breath makes a difference. Each time makes a difference. And we'll open to all the places where we distract ourselves, where we keep ourselves attached to something else, and how, in a nutshell, we create our own pain and suffering. And it's a challenging path. And it's one that not everybody walks very far on. But it's one that if we walk far enough, it brings nothing short of total liberation. Total liberation. So that no matter what circumstances we find ourselves in, no matter how painful, how difficult, how frightening, there's a profound okayness within us. We're able to meet it without the usual reactivity we would have had we not had that openness. And I think here of Jacques Lutheran in Buchenwald, who, when he was first taken to Buchenwald, he walked into a nightmare. Actually, he had already been something of a nightmare because he had been in a French prison, imprisoned by the Germans in France for quite a few months before that, and then he was sent to Buchenwald. And he was blind, and so the desperate prisoners in the invalids block that he was housed in stole his bread and stole his soup. And he was starving. Not only that, but everywhere there was terror. People were being murdered publicly and privately. It was an insanity. And he wrote that the only people that were happy were the people who were insane, because they were in that block too, because they were not considered worthy of surviving by the Nazis. And after 5 months, it was too much for him, and he became deathly ill, and he was taken away to die by a couple of other prisoners. And he didn't. Instead, he focused intimately on what was going on in his body. He knew what every cell in his body was doing. And he wrote about it in great description. And because of the profound awareness, in the midst of that, he had a deep awakening experience. And when he healed and went back into living with all the other prisoners, I mean, when they took him out, they took him to a piece of concrete where they laid people down who were going to die. It was not like he went into a sick room. But when he got well, suddenly nobody stole his food anymore. And instead they would wake him up to take him to prisoners who were freaking out because he could calm them down. He had such presence, such caring, such awareness that it was palpable to people. And moreover, he said that he had found joy in his very illness, as a result of his very illness. Through that awakening, he found joy. And the joy never left him, even though he still had 11 more months in hell before he was liberated. Hold this example when your zazen is beginning to flag, and use it to re-inspire yourself. I hope none of you will ever have to have the experience of a Buchenwald. Given the condition of the world these days, with terrorism popping up left and right in very unexpected places, we don't know. There's no way we can count on it. How will it be for you if suddenly you're in the midst of one of those scenes that has happened recently, where the terrorists walked into the restaurant in France and just started mowing people down? Suicide bombers. blew themselves up in a couple of other locations, where the couple, the young couple who had just had a baby, and the co-workers of the husband had given them a shower, a baby shower, and embraced them. And then they went and got some machine guns and went in to a Christmas party and mowed down their co-workers. How would it be if we were in one of those situations? It's important to practice now. Not only because the possibility has increased that we might end up in one of those situations, but because the more deeply we can go in our practice, the more our innate compassion and wisdom will rise and be manifest in everything we do and say and think. And that's invaluable in the world. Our vows begin with liberating all beings. That means liberating all the stuck places in our own mind. And it also means offering what we can to relieving suffering in the world. We've chosen this path, and it's one of the most incredible things we can do in our life. So, dive in. Dive in. Give yourself fully to the practice. Don't let anything stop you, but don't try to shove it out of the picture. Embrace it. Open to how it feels in your body. I thank you for listening. We'll stop now and recite the